It is the high campaign season, a dozen years into the 8th century since the birth of Christ, and at the Guadalete River, two armies have converged, each to vanquish the other. The first is the host of the king of Visigothic Spain, Roderick, whose short reign has been blighted by a civil war, uprising, and invasion. Facing him is the force of Tariq ibn Ziyad, representing the now overpowering conglomeration of the Umayyad Caliphate. With the Arab armies having wiped out the ancient empire of the Persians in its entirety, along with the Roman provinces of Syria, Egypt, North Africa, and even putting Constantinople itself to the siege, it is now Hispania's turn to face their seemingly irresistible forces. Roderick meets them at the Guadalete with a numerically stronger army, but what happens next is mired in myth. A large number of the king's forces either switch sides or abandon him in the face of the enemy, with one account stating that an entire wing of the Visigoth army turns away to leave the royal centre exposed to the Arab riders. By the close of battle, Roderick lies dead, and his army vanquished almost to the man. Even those who turned against the king in the hopes of gaining from his death are not spared from the wrath of Tariq. But one man, taken prisoner in the fighting and held initially at Cordoba, does manage to escape and leave the hellish storm behind, riding north through the cities that are now swiftly falling to the Arabs and Berbers, and eventually finding a shelter in the high mountains of the north of the peninsula. His name is Pelagius, though the Spanish would remember him as Pelayo. And it is with him that the story of the 700-year Reconquista begins. It is ironic that Pelayo finds his base of resistance to the new Arab ruling order in the lands of the Basques and the Asturian mountains. The region that is separated from Leon by the mountain range to its south, and the north by another low cavalcade of hills that run into the Bay of Biscay and the sea, had traditionally held out against both the Roman and the Gothic authorities for centuries. Pelayo is elected to lead the remnants of the Visigothic order that have escaped with him, with some later chroniclers stating that he was of the royal blood and so entitled to the throne. There are many indications that his father was the Visigothic governor of the Cantabrian province where he now makes his base of power. This is possible, but it is just as likely that Pelayo is simply a notable warrior who has no intention of submitting himself to the African invaders. There were many such cases, but though chronicles are often confused and contradictory, most of them make plain that the greater number of the surviving Visigothic leadership come to terms and even marry off their female relatives to the leaders of the Umayyad army. The sons of the former king Witizia are said to have embraced this craven skin-saving policy. Pelayo has no such intentions. As more and more towns fall to the Arabs, as far as Guadalajara in their first onslaught, and then Zaragoza, Asturica and Lugo in their second 2 years after, he and the remaining independent Christian lords' lands remain confined to the tiny strip along the north of the peninsula. Tariq and the Umayyad governor of Africa, Musa ibn Nusayr, continue the campaigns until they are summoned back to Damascus by the Caliph al-Walid I. And with their conquests now reaching the Bay of Biscay, they make the journey laden with spoils from the peninsula. Musa's son, Abd al-Aziz ibn Musa, next creates the province of Andalus, and to signify both the new order's domination as well as continuity of the past, he marries King Roderick's wife, Echelona, and takes the Islamic name Asim. Ironically, Abd's union with the former queen gives rise to many rumors that he intends to throw off his faith and proclaim himself as a Christian king over the still overwhelming Catholic population. Abd is thus assassinated, likely on the Caliph's orders, around 716. Abd's cousin Ayub ibn Habib al-Lakmi takes over the governorship in the wake of his death. But his term lasts only half a year, and he is succeeded in turn by al-Hur ibn Abd al-Rahman al-Thaqafi, and it is during his rule that Andalus undergoes a large degree of stabilization. The government and taxation of villages as well as larger settlements formalized, and new bilingual coins put into circulation. There is even expansion beyond the realm of ancient Hispania, and the first Islamic raids on southern Gaul are carried out during this time, with mixed results. Unlike the Visigoths, who had only ever faced outside threats from their border with Gaul, Frankish society operates on a number of fronts, and so is a far more martial culture by the early 8th century. Though it would appear that Gaul will be a much tougher proposition than Iberia, the Caliphate's leaders have only to look at their unprecedented success in conquering such vast territories in so short a time for reassurance that they will ultimately prevail with repeated campaigns. Al-Hur's period of relative consolidation comes to an end with his replacement as governor by Al-Sam ibn Malik al-Khawlani. Publicly wishing to take revenge on the Franks for the asylum granted to some Visigothic leaders, Al-Sam first takes and holds Barcelona and then Narbonne, using the latter as his launch pad to invade southern Gaul. The Franks sharpen their weapons in anticipation. While all of these events are transpiring across the peninsula and the Pyrenees, Pelagius and his still unconquered province have been fighting what amounts to a tribal war against the new regime. The Umayyads have posted garrisons and personnel around the area, but Pelagius' band, possibly as scant as a few score men at times, raid and burn these forces on a constant basis. When the Umayyads and their local collaborators attempt to engage and pursue the attackers, Pelagius' men simply melt back into the mountains and impossible to reach defiles and caves. A major attempt by the local Muslim governor and the Christian metropolitan of Seville to eradicate his base at Cangas de Onís and bring him into custody proves a dismal failure. Eventually, the Andalus authorities effectively write off the area in favor of the far richer and open pickings to the northeast. The mountains are poor and will also no doubt be brought under control with time. As one Arab historian writes, "What threat are 30 brigands sitting on a rock when Al-Sam had just taken Barcelona and is now eyeing Toulouse?" For his own part, Al-Sam seems to spend the year of 720 consolidating his holdings in Septimania, the Umayyad domain in Gaul. The final Visigothic king Arab dies around this time, likely in battle somewhere in the region, possibly even in the battle for Narbonne. And Carcassonne, the last Visigothic population centre, is put to the siege. The next campaign season of 721, however, begins with a huge Arab, Berber and Iberian army moving north directly for the city of Toulouse. This is no mere raiding party. Probably close to 20,000 soldiers, as well as many times that of camp followers, and even the wives and families of fighting men are streaming north. Al-Sam wants the new border of the Caliphate to be the Garonne, and with its many tributaries and rich valleys, the armies of the faith will use its wealth to push ever forward to the Rhône, the Loire, and the Rhine. The realm they are now entering is no longer that of the fractious and divided Visigoths. Toulouse is the capital of the Duchy of Aquitaine, nominally under the rule of Charles Martel, King of the Franks, but in practice an independent fiefdom. As recently as 2 years earlier, Charles and Odo, Duke of Aquitaine, joined battle against one another when Odo supported Charles's doomed rival Chilperic in the Frankish Civil War. Odo swore allegiance to Charles in the aftermath, but the vassalage is as thin as tissue paper. Nevertheless, when Alsam's army arrives before the great walls of Toulouse, they find that Odo has seemingly fled, searching for aid from his nominal king. The garrison of Toulouse spurns the notion of surrendering the city to the invaders, however, and the lines are dug and the engines brought forward. While the fighting rages at Toulouse, Odo receives short shrift from Charles, who accuses him of disloyalty and even making previous agreements with the heathen Umayyad. Charles also suspects that Odo is in league with the Burgundians, who hope to make their own break from the Frankish realm. Odo leaves the court empty-handed, but not without hope. Aquitaine is a rich duchy, and unlike most of the former provinces of the old Roman Empire, its cities have not gone into decline. In fact, many of them have actually grown outside their ancient walls and are thriving in the southern climate. Its men are also well acquainted with the ways of war. Odo sets about building an army. When it arrives at Toulouse, it is not a moment too late. The chronicles make clear that the city was on the verge of capitulation, but instead its garrison and the Duke's army unleash a savage two-pronged attack. Alsam's army attempt to defend, but the momentum of the Aquitanians is too much to resist, and the Caliphate soldiers either die where they stand or flee. The smoke from their burning siege engines rises into the air behind them. Alsam manages to get away with a cohort of his men, but he has been mortally wounded in the fighting, and it is likely that he never makes the journey back into Iberia. In his wake, the governorship of Andalus passes to Anbasa ibn Suham al-Kalbi, a stern and determined ruler with strong familial and clan ties to Arabia. It falls to him to reconstitute the still nascent province of the Caliphate, following its first major defeat. And there is much work to be done. In Gaul, the Franks are celebrating their victory as a divine deliverance and tribute to their feats of arms, their stories inflating the number of Caliphate soldiers killed to absurd levels above 100,000 men. Al-Kalbi realizes the power that these legends will have on the still overwhelmingly Christian population of Iberia, as well as the people of Gaul, so he begins his new reconstruction with a doubling of the jizya tax on non-Islamic populations in areas under his control. He also organizes and sends out renewed raiding parties into Gaul to keep the authorities and settlements there on the back foot. Back in Iberia, however, there is one outstanding issue that requires resolution, and that is Pelagius's now de facto independent princedom in the Asturias. Al-Kalbi sees an opportunity in its defiance. The Asturias are not a particularly wealthy area, but an easy and quick victory for his army, even over a disparate rabble, will be a boon for morale and a restart of the Caliphate's expansion. It will also assert his reputation to the Iberian population as a martial and victorious leader. The Umayyad army moves into the Asturias in two columns, one under a commander named Munutsa and the other named Al-Kama. Order and submission are to be established in areas where their rule has not reached before, and those miscreants that defied the Caliphate are to feel the wrath of its arms. Munutsa takes the western regions, while Al-Kama takes the east, and it is reported to him that Pelagius, leading what is effectively an armed band, has retreated into the mountains and gone to ground in the vicinity of the settlement of Covadonga. It is said that the would-be rebel is hiding in a cave. Identifying Pelagius as the linchpin of the campaign, Alcama hurriedly goes on pursuit, tracking Pelagius to one of the myriad river valleys in the area. Pelagius' own state of mind at this time differs according to the chronicler in question. There are some who say that he is in fact hiding from fear of the enemy, while others are of the view that he is merely biding his time. In the cave, Pelagius discovers a statue of the Virgin Mary, saved from the conquest by a hermit, and he is said to undergo divine visions, which tell that he will emerge victorious in his mission, but he must keep his faith. The Bishop of Seville, Oppa, a collaborator with the Umayyads and accompanying Alcama's army, prevails on Pelayo to surrender himself and his band of outlaws, rather than bring ruination on themselves and their people. But Pelayo again refuses to submit. Meanwhile, at the mouth of the valley to which he has brought his force, Alcama has arrived and demanded that all those resident surrender to him. An emissary of Pelagius arrives and holds council with the Umayyad leader, but no agreement is reached, and the intermediary leaves to report to Pelagius. Enraged at the non-compliance shown by the Asturians, Alcama sets out to follow the herald and the small party that accompany him, leading the Umayyad column further into the valley of the Deva River, where he is now actively seeking out a confrontation with the bandit leader. Seemingly convinced that Pelagius is cowering with nothing more than an outlaw gang, Alcama apparently neglects to post outriders on the wood-covered ridges above, and when they are far into what is effectively a ravine, still pursuing the elusive figures of the herald and his party in front, they notice that the defile is growing narrower. Before they realize it, the walls of the ravine rise so high that they are basically sheer perpendicular cliff faces. From this bottleneck, they pass into what at first seems a clearing. The clearing is in fact a dead end, which Alcama notices all too tardily. No fewer than 3 peaks block their way, each one thousands of feet high. The party of horsemen they have been hunting now turn about, and worse, figures appear at the cliff edge with ominous-looking objects in their hands. It is an ambush. Arrows rain down on the unmissable target of the Umayyad column. Alcama has his men return shots with their own bows, but the elevated position of the Asturians, as well as the fact that many of them are firing from cave mouths, mean that the great majority of the bolts from the valley floor are inaccurate or merely bounce off the rock. Alcama attempts to make a stand, to endure until the enemy has run out of ammunition, but the losses and the sheer exposed position of the column proves overwhelming, and the order is given for a withdrawal. Taking yet more losses, the Umayyads turn to leave the killing ground. But Pelayo has anticipated this action, and the figures amidst the chestnut trees lining the cliff edge multiply, and they begin throwing heavy boulders as well as tree boughs down onto the riders and into their path. Alcama's escape is blocked, his company in complete disorder and unable to move effectively, and that is when Pelayo unleashes the final act of his ambush. From the caves and the redoubts all around, the Asturians launch themselves at the column, materializing like demons and fighting with an intensity to match that terrifying aspect. Within less than an hour, the entire Umayyad column has been wiped out, bodies littering the ravine, and the Asturians have struck a blow against the invader that will resound at first throughout their province, and then the whole of Iberia. In the wake of the victory, support for Pelagius flows from the entire region, and indeed the territories beyond, for he becomes a magnet for the Visigoth remnants, still holding out against the Arab and Berber invasion. Swiftly elected king, he moves with a much stronger force against the second column of Munuza, who has gathered up whatever scattered fragments remain of Al-Kama's force, along with the very few survivors from Covadonga, and Pelagius defeats the second army in just as decisive fashion as the first. Pelagius's victory over Munuza confirms his status and legitimacy, and suddenly, from overwhelming victory and seemingly endless expansion, the Umayyad Caliphate has been checked in brutal fashion, both by the Aquitanians of Toulouse, and again by the seemingly lowly peasants of the Asturias. The independence of the mountain region with access to the sea now confirmed, a perennial thorn in the side of Andalus has been fixed in place. The birth of the Reconquista has begun in the cave of Pelayo, in the shadow of the Covadonga ravine. If you like what you see, consider supporting my work on Patreon, and you get ad-free early access to my videos for as little as $1. You can also show your support by liking the video, commenting, and subscribing to my channel as a sacrifice to the algorithm. As always, I'll see you in the next one.